What are we actually doing with most of our time? And this is a real question for each of you. What are you doing most of the time? What's your most common activity? And I think for me, it feels like I spend most of my time doing housework, doing dishes and shopping and cooking and washing diapers. And I mean, that's what we're actually doing with our hours. And there's nothing wrong with that. So, how do we zen with that? Good morning. Thank you for being here. I do appreciate the chance to gather with you and do some Zen. So this Dharma talk was prepared for the Intro to Zen day today. And I wanted to start by offering just a tiny reflection. As some of you know, myself and my family were at Beecher House last week for a week. And part of what's nice about being on the monastery property is being in that relatively natural setting where instead of being surrounded by buildings and sirens and car horns and people and dog poop, you're surrounded by, trees and flowers and the wind and the rain and goose poop. And something that a number of times over the years, I've had the opportunity to hike on the ridges above the monastery. And it always strikes me, you walk for an hour and you get up somewhere, and if you take even a few steps off of one of the trails, you run into an old tree that's all gnarled, or a piece of moss on a rock, or you see a little water dripping off the moss onto some little wet spot on the ground. And you may be the first human to look at that in a decade or more, but it's been there the whole time, just doing the thing that it does, being a tree, just being some moss. And it doesn't matter that nobody notices it, nobody cares that it's there. And it doesn't have any agenda. The moss is not trying to do anything. And it's not worrying about the future. And it's not regretting something that it didn't do. The trees are just being trees. The moss is just being moss. The rocks are just being rocks. And they're beautiful. And as we were about to leave Beecher House last Sunday, a week ago, and come back to the city, I was sitting on the dock next to the lake and looking at some of the newts, and I felt a moment, a sort of poignant, I don't know what, like almost a grief that I was going to leave these newts, and these newts were going to continue in their perfect freedom from concern and keep doing whatever that they've been doing, and they're going to keep doing it while we're gone. And we were going to plunge ourselves back into the world of palpable tension here in the city about always trying to get somewhere and do something. And I remember Giun Sensei saying that he wanted to be a mushroom monk, a being that lived and died out in the woods, well outside of the sight or care of any other being. No one would notice that he came and gone and passed. And I think there's something to notice about that. There's something to notice about the fact that we feel comforted and relaxed and freer when we're surrounded by a wilderness setting like that, a setting that's devoid of agendas, devoid of worry, devoid of concerns, devoid of regret. All those beings arise and live and pass away. And it doesn't bother them at all that they pass away. It doesn't bother them at all that they're injured by lightning or whatever. They just are. It's good to spend some time with beings like that. So, for the purposes of this talk, I'm reflecting more about the simple fact that most of us in the Sangha, most of us in the room, are not living in a monastery. I'm acknowledging that when I think about Zen practice, I am often thinking about monastic practice. I'm thinking about the way it was during my training monks days, and thinking that that's the way it is, the way it should be. That's sort of my reference for what Zen is. And maybe that's fine, but that's not the context that most of us are living in. I mean, even myself, I'm not living in a monastery, and my lifestyle is rather different from the monastic lifestyle at this point. It's somewhere in a weird between space between home leaver lifestyle and home haver lifestyle, with strong features of the home haver lifestyle for me. So, that being the case, how do we actually do Zen practice in the midst of our householder responsibilities, our householder lives, our decidedly non-monastic lives? And that also makes me think of the Bodhisattva initiation invitation that Shigen Roshi sent out, the Jukai invitation, where he talks about how Jukai, the ceremony, is sometimes also called, I think I've got this right, Zaikei Tokudo, which means accomplishing the way without leaving home. So how do we do that? How do we practice this way in our homes, in the midst of where we live and what we do? For me, the first question is, you.
Working, maybe.
Working, maybe? Juhi, what are you doing mostly?
Well, following my plans and daily duties and some fun.
Yeah. What about Maria?
Working.
Working. Jigiji-san, what do you do mostly? How are you spending your time?
Mostly working, stressing out about work.
Good. Yeah.
Lots of PhD-style research projects and teaching.
Yeah. Muken, who knows what Muken does?
I just kind of sit there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for me, I mean, I don't know if this is empirically true, but it feels like I spend most of my time doing housework, doing dishes and shopping and cooking and doing dishes and washing diapers and cooking and shopping and doing dishes. So that's what we're actually doing with our hours. There's nothing wrong with that. So how do we Zen with that? One thing I can say off the top is it is probably fair to acknowledge that some activities are more suited to a formal Zen practice than others. So, to make a contrast, if I'm doing something that's clearly verbal, like writing emails or talking on the phone, it's harder in the midst of that to do certain specific Zen things than it is if I'm doing something that's not necessarily verbal, like washing a dish or cleaning a floor. If I don't have to speak, if I don't have to create concepts and use concepts in my mind, it's easier for me to be engaged in a deliberate breathing practice. It's easier for me to be aware of my breathing body, and it's also easier to do actual koan work if that's something you're doing. Harder if you have to talk, harder if you have to use your conceptual mind. Fine. That said, we can still talk about concentration practice. So the second training of the Buddha is concentration, a focus. And as we know, the focal point of concentration, the object of concentration, can be anything. To put it in simple language, you can pay attention to anything that you're doing. And every time we do that, we strengthen our concentration. So whatever we're doing, whether it's sitting zazen or sweeping or cooking or shopping or doing your job, you can pay attention to it. You can concentrate, meaning that you can deliberately bring your attention in a focused way to the thing you're doing for the aims of whatever that activity is. For the purpose of doing that activity well, you can bring your full attention to it. And when you do, that flexes the muscle of being able to direct your mind. It almost sounds dumb to say these things out loud because they're so sort of self-evident once it makes sense to you. But if you become well practiced at directing your mind to a deliberate activity, that applies to everything. That applies to your formal practice on the cushion. That applies to whatever else you might do. And again, if I can make a sort of dualistic distinction, a comparison, that kind of deliberately paying attention has more Zen value than allowing your mind to run feral. Because what your mind tends to do when it has no leash on it is that it tends to sort of pour energy into daydreams, pour energy into fantasy, pour energy into regret, pour energy into some sort of rumination on a desire you have or an aversion you have, and those feed it themselves. So if we want to not unconsciously just pour mental energy into generating more attachment for ourselves, then it's very useful to be deliberately directing the mind to, this is what we're doing right now. These are the needs of this situation, and we're paying attention to that right now. So concentration, you can always concentrate no matter what your job is, no matter what your activity is. And then beyond that, I think there's a great deal to be said for using your formal practice time, using your time on the cushion, using your time in the temple to develop certain habits. So I think it's true that our lives are to a high degree determined by the habits we have. And so if we construct those habits on purpose in a place like this, that really has a far-reaching effect on how our lives go. So for example, we can talk about body posture habits. So in Zen, generally speaking, we practice, we cultivate an upright, energized, alert posture with a good flow of chi, of ki. And we do this most obviously when we're sitting zazen. We sit upright, we are physically alert, helps us to be mentally alert. And that, of course, can inform your life outside the temple. And you might as well look at your life outside the temple as being an equally good place to apply these postures, right? Because it's not just in the Zendo that it's useful to be alert, to be energized, to be well-grounded, balanced. And I'm thinking about the things Edo Roshi used to say when I was living at DBZ years ago. We were definitely instructed in various simple physical things during that monastery training. We weren't allowed to lean on anything. We always had to be standing up, supporting our own body, be bodily self-sufficient. We weren't allowed to put our hands in our pockets. Always have your hands out. Have your hands ready to work, ready to be engaged in what's going on. Edo Roshi was very clear about that. Don't walk with your hands swinging by your sides. So if we move down the hallway at the monastery, we should always have our hands in shashu like this, or we're carrying something. And if we're carrying something, again, I'm not just carrying it and swinging my arm around. I'm carrying that thing with both hands. So it's clear that my attention is together here on what I'm doing, on what I'm interacting with. I'm not just daydreaming and like swinging a thing around as I go. And it seems maybe weirdly formal to be walking around like this in the monastery life, but it does help to focus your attention. It helps you to be centered in a mental spiritual way, to have your mind here in your hara. And so you're doing that all day, not just when you're sitting zazen. You're always bringing your mind, bringing your attention back to your physical center. And of course, it's more powerful to do that all the time than to do it just during a couple hours of the day when you're by name sitting zazen. And so, as I talk about these things, as I'm sort of reflecting on these things, it may be that this seems silly to you. It may be that these seem like really meaningless details, and you might be thinking, well, how is holding my hands in a particular way while I walk going to result in my unsurpassed cosmic liberation? I mean, sure, I used to think that too, but that would be making the mistake of thinking that your liberation is somehow separate from the condition of your body right now, somehow separate from your physical reality in this life, in this moment. And what else do we have to work with? You know, Zen training deliberately engages with these very simple, very concrete and observable details, because that's what's real. Like, that's what's there right now. Right now I have that thing. And I wasn't paying attention to it, and now it fell over. That's what's really going on right now. We don't need to be fantasizing that there's something important out there that we can't see that we need to somehow be spending our time on. So we have these body posture habits. We also have breathing habits, which is probably the most obvious thing to talk about. One of the things we do in our practice formally is that we train the body to breathe in certain specific ways. Maybe most clearly, we train the body to breathe deeply and calmly. And again, the more we do that in this place, the more it is natural for us to do it in every other place. The more it's natural for us to be breathing calmly, breathing deeply in the midst of everything else that we do. And it helps to calm you, it helps to relax you, it helps to keep you centered, it helps to keep your body well oxygenated. And all these things are good, all these things are helpful. So if we want to think about engaging in breathing practice in everyday activities, this is pretty simple. We can simply practice noticing what the quality of our breath is like in any situation. Try to notice when your breath becomes shallow, when it becomes fast, when it becomes anxious or tight or high up in your body, when you're sort of getting toward that asthmatic, the fight or flight breath. And that's not wrong if your body's doing that, but notice it. And if you don't need your body to be doing that, if you don't want your body to be doing that in the moment, if it's not helping, then see if you can adjust. See if you can deliberately guide your body toward a different mode of breathing, toward breathing more deeply. And there are some activities in your everyday life where you can deliberately enter a more zazen type breathing, a deeper hara-based breath that lets you bring your mind back into your center and lets you be right here, right now, right in the middle of yourself, in the middle of your life. And I don't know if this means anything to you. I want to take this a step further. So basically, in basic Zen breathing, part of what we're doing is, according to Hakuin, we're filling our hara with ki. We're deliberately putting ki in our hara. And I think to some of you that makes perfect sense. But I think maybe to other folks, what is ki? What are you talking about? And if you're thinking that way, let's make it more physical. Let's say that part of our basic zazen breathing in a subtle way engages muscles in the core, in the abdomen, And that muscular engagement helps to bring the mental attention down to that physical place. And you do that over and over again on the cushion for hours, hundreds of hours, thousands of hours. It makes a habit. It makes a physical habit. It makes that part of your body accustomed to functioning in that way. It's simple. Any physical habit you build works the same way. But then if your core, if your hara is used to working in that way, then you'll be out on the street, out in the subway, washing your dishes, cutting your carrot, whatever you do, and you'll notice that your body's still doing it. You'll notice that your hara is still doing it. And now it's the body leading the mind. You're not making a deliberate effort to function in that way, but your body is so used to doing it that your body is bringing your attention back to this centered place by itself, unbidden. And I think that's very useful. For me, it helps me to be grounded in the rest of my life. When things are chaotic, when I'm out in the relative bustle of the city, still from time to time, I notice that my hara, my abdomen is doing this thing that I've been doing for years. And it brings my attention back there. It brings my state of being back to this meditative state of being, maybe just for a moment, but it's still this check-in. Where are you? When are you? Now, here. Okay, this is what's actually happening. So whatever it was I was worried about that wasn't actually happening, I can let go of that for a second, and I can be right where I actually am for a second. Another habit we can talk about that's useful to cultivate is the habit of precision. Again, something we train on purpose when we practice together formally. We practice doing all the elements of the form in a precise way. You strike the gong at a particular time, at a particular volume. You place the incense burner right in the center of the altar, and you have it oriented so that the right part of it is facing out. All of these little things. Precision. One of my favorite examples is we clean the incense burners every day, right? So somebody does that every day. And a lot of times I'll be walking through the temple at night closing things, and I'll notice that someone has cleaned the incense burner, but they've left a splash of ash on the altar. So you haven't really cleaned the incense burner. Really, you've made an ash mess on the altar next to the incense burner. And there's a lack of precision there. There's a lack of precision in what you're noticing and what you're doing. Okay, I'm not trying to call anybody out. That's not the point. But there's the opportunity to be more sensitively aware of what you're doing and what's right in front of you. So when we do this precision training in the Zendo, this detail training, it works in two ways. Up front, it works in terms of increasing the sensitivity of our perception. We learn to notice the specific details of what's actually right in front of us. You notice that some of the cushions are out of alignment. You notice that one of the sutra books is in the wrong spot. You notice that there's spider webs in the entryway there. You notice all these little things, just simple, concrete things. It's nothing special, but it is in fact what's right in front of you. It's your real life. And you learn to see it. Whereas a lot of times we don't see these things. We just blow right past them because our minds are on something else. And then apart from the perceptivity part of it, we also train the precision of our actions. So, we train ourselves to put things in a particular place, to be precise about how we place things, how we touch things, all of that. So it works on the two ends of the exchange. And again, I'm writing this, preparing for this talk, and I'm thinking, well, maybe this sounds really dumb, Who really gives a crap at the end of the day whether the zabuton is 4 degrees out of perfect alignment? Nobody, of course. It does not change the world, but also it does because it's the cumulative effect of all these attentive actions, all these careful, precise actions that builds the atmosphere of this whole place. we generate the temple, really the spiritual temple we create by practicing in here. And that builds an atmosphere that people notice. It builds an atmosphere that affects people. Every Thursday, someone says, "Oh, it's such a beautiful space. I really appreciated this space because it feels different than my cluttered bedroom at home in my apartment." Of course it does. And what makes that true is uncountable thousands of people over the last 56 years making an effort to be specific about how they behave in this place. Another thing that we can practice, back up. Talking about precision or detail, I don't think I have to say anything about how that's useful in the rest of your life, right? Like, whatever your job is professionally, you're better at it if you're paying attention to the detail. You're better at it if you're able to notice the subtleties of what's going on, if you're able to act in precise ways. I think that's goes without saying. Closely related to the concept of precision, I think, is the concept of training in thoroughness, training in doing a job all the way. And for me, over the years, the value of this actually has been in changing my perception. Again, making myself more perceptive to what's going on. Because it's very easy for us to do a job kind of halfway and think it's done and walk away from it. But what expands our minds a little bit is learning to see how to really finish the job. Learning to see how to do the job so thoroughly that there's no trace left that the job was ever there. So, simple, obvious example. In the Dharma hall, we often are washing dishes over there in the sink. We could wash the dishes. We could leave them in the rack to dry. And from an ordinary perspective, that's a perfectly sane thing to do, but that leaves more work for someone else later. And it leaves evidence of the thing that happened. You see the dishes in the rack. From a Zen perspective, it's better to wash them and dry them and put them away and wipe down the counter and sweep the floor and then clean the sink. And then when you leave, there's no trace that you were ever there. There's no trace that anything ever happened. The next person who walked in, they just see a clean room. Everything's clean, everything's put away. The room is ready for the next activity. And so there's no residue of what you did. It's all wiped away. This is more the Zen style, because it forces you to be conscious of the junk you leave in your wake. It forces you to be conscious of the aftermath of your presence in a place. And in Zen, we live by that wilderness camping ethos, the leave no trace ethos. In a true sense, a temple like this, it's a place with nobody in it. There's never been anybody here. Everyone who walks in sees the place, clean, empty, orderly, ready for what we're doing. And then when we do what we're doing, and then we erase it, and it never happened. And then we leave, and it all happens over again. So when we do good Zen work, it's so thorough that there's no evidence that any particular person did it. Whatever it is, it's just done. And it's done beautifully and precisely and in a lovely way. And you never even have to think, who did this? You can be grateful that someone did it, and you can think, who did this? But you're not prompted to think, who did this? In a way of like, who did this? Right? Working thoroughly. And again, talking about temple stuff, it's very obvious how this applies in all the other pieces of your life as well. One of the ways that we can talk about working thoroughly is in terms of talking about a kind of purification of the heart-mind. Rather than doing a task in a way that we think it should be done, we can challenge ourselves to do the task in a way it's a little bit more. It's a little bit further than we would have gone. And making that little extra effort, that helps to clean the soul. I don't know if I can explain it any better than that. Either you feel that or you don't, but you can grow to feel it. Another thing we can train in the temple that influences everything else we do is virya, the paramita of vigor. We can work here with vigor. We can sit with vigor. We can chant with vigor. And that also, it's like a muscle. You get better and better at it as you do it more. And it becomes easier and easier to have energy, to bring energy to the task. We work with energy. We move with energy. And part of the way to understand why we do that is to think about the opposite. Think about the times in your life when you don't work with energy, when you're dragging your feet because, oh, I don't want to do this. You don't want to do whatever it is. It can be anything. And so you do it slowly. You do it reluctantly. You do it in a sort of silent protest, right? We all do this. You know what I'm talking about. But this is not really the Zen way of doing things. That resistance to doing the task is your ego. It's your preferences. It's your selfishness. You want your circumstances to be whatever you want them to be. You don't want to have to do this thing that you have to do. And you feel that bleh. You feel that sluggishness, that sort of like egotistical grime in the situation that's holding you back. And so in Zen, much better to just throw yourself into it. Just go, just launch, bring your full energy, have your eyes wide open, have your hands out, get involved, clean what's dirty, straighten what's out of alignment, put away what's out of place. Look again and notice that there's another thing out of place that you didn't even see the first time. And as we practice this rinzai briskness, this energy in the temple, it helps us to break apart that resistance, break apart that egoic, I don't wanna, that pops up so often in various aspects of our lives. And like everything we do, it builds, it's progressive, it gets easier over time. And it's a habit. You can either reinforce the habit of trying to avoid things that you don't want to be involved in, or you can reinforce the habit of just plunging into your life, whatever your life is demanding of you right now, and just doing it. Just go. Don't look back. Don't think about it. And either of those tracks feeds itself. So I don't want to go on forever. This talk could be huge. We could talk about right speech. A lot of what you do in your daily life is talking and listening. And all of that sort of Buddhist-wise falls under the umbrella of right speech. And we can practice right speech deliberately in the temple, and we can practice it anywhere else. And when we do practice it, it changes the quality of our life. It changes the quality of the situation. But there's so much to say about that I can't say anything else about it right now. And the same for compassion, right? Huge. Any piece of your life, you can practice compassion. You can practice deliberately saying, what's this situation like for that other person? Whatever they're doing, no matter how shitty they're being, what's their life like? What are they dealing with? Why are they the way they are? Is there something I can bring to this situation that makes it a tiny bit easier for them? Whoever they are, whatever they are. And we can practice that on purpose here in a formal way, but it's not just for here. It's not, we don't have to be sitting in this room to engage in the Zen practice of compassion. Let's put it that way. So, in the interest of getting toward shutting up, all of these things that I've talked about just now, these are practices or ethics that are included in our formal training. They are part of Zen in a formal way, in a nominal way. And they're also virtues that you can bring to anything that you're doing, any activity that's going on in any quarter of your life. And I do like to use the metaphor that the temple is a sort of spiritual gymnasium, right? This is where you go to strengthen your spiritual muscles. You come in here for a spiritual workout. And sometimes you also have the aid of a personal trainer. Gives you individualized instruction and encouragement. But you walk out the door at the end, you use all the same muscles out elsewhere as you do here. So, and of course the difference between Zen and this workout metaphor is that here in Zen, we're not just trying to get strong or look good in a superficial way. We're instead polishing ourselves. We're refining our humanity. We're becoming more mature and more capable and more compassionate and contented and wise and useful, becoming more useful human beings, more beautiful human beings in a deeper way. And all of this is 100% relevant no matter where you are, no matter what day it is, no matter what you're doing, no matter who you're with, no matter what's happening right around you. So maybe sometimes you say to yourself, as I have said to myself, oh, I don't get to come to the Zendo as often as I want. Oh, I don't get to do as much Zazen as I want. Well, that can only be true if you are viewing some part of this world as not being the Zendo.